Very excited. Please do go ahead, put into the chat box anything you'd like to know. We're going to be talking with Erin and Jean and Nicole, as well as Femida. So let's do this. I actually have a starting question based on the video. As a matter of fact, I have many questions, but let's start with this one. Erin, you brought up something that was so incredible. And I know that you, via the chat, that this was talked about inside of your breakout room as well. And it's the concept of survivor's guilt. Can we go into how does that feel, a little bit more about what that means to you, and how have you overcome that? Which is a big question.
That is a big question. It's a really, really important one, though. I feel like it's such a struggle, and it points to what we struggle most as women, I think. So for me, my business, when we were closed, when we reopened, our sales were really good. And we made up that lag of being closed because I'm in an industry where people don't really purchase online. And so they waited for us to reopen. And I know so many businesses that is so not true for them. You know, they'll never get Valentine's Day back. They'll never get Christmas back. Like they have missed out on that revenue for the year. And so there's this internal struggle of like, how do I feel about that? Like, how do I process the fact that we didn't have it as bad as other people? And that's sometimes our tendency as women, right? Well, somebody else has it worse, so I don't have it bad. As we downplay what we've gone through, we downplay the struggle. And I think it's important to like live in that struggle a little bit. It's okay to say, hey, you know what? Just because other people had it worse doesn't mean I haven't had it harder, doesn't mean I haven't had challenges this past year. So that first and foremost, like acknowledging that. And then just because other people have had it bad does not mean we have not struggled. And so just living in that space for a little bit. I like the term survival's guilt. Because this year has been hard for everyone. And I think we just full stop. We just need to acknowledge that.
Yeah. And I think you're definitely not alone, Erin, and it's such some industries were incredibly hard hit, whereas I know there are other industries that have just skyrocketed, right?
Mm-hmm.
And even within industries, so like in my speaker world, some people just adopted virtual and their businesses blew up and others didn't, right? And it does change the conversation. I think it's a lot about who you surround yourself with and where the safe places are to talk, right? And to have that conversation. It's interesting, Nicole, you sort of touched on it as well in your video. And I think what you had said is wasn't as bad off as others. You said the same thing, didn't you, as Erin? You go ahead. Do you want to comment on that and what you felt through that?
That's exactly how I felt. I just felt like my business, we didn't lose any sales. In fact, if anything, we gained a lot of sales. And people just had more time to shop online maybe, or I have a strong community around my business. So they felt the need to support, and that's amazing. But yeah, I just felt like I wasn't losing any sales. I wasn't feeling any stress financially about it. So I just figured, there are businesses out there who have to close their doors, like Jean, and that's hard for them. And I felt like if anything, any kind of funds or money or any kind of support should go to the people losing out. It's so hard for them. And I didn't feel like I needed that at the time. And I look back and I think, well, the support would have been nice, but I still stand by that. I know that other people may need it more than me. And then I always struggle with that. I always will, because it's the person I am, right? So, yeah.
So it's interesting because I feel like that's because I've done that in the past as well, right? Like it's a very, I don't know. I'm going to open this up, and actually I'm going to ask you to put this in the chat box. Do you think that as women, we are more likely to have a sense of survivor's guilt? I'm asking the whole audience here. Like, is anybody else resonating with this? Right? Like, I don't know if men have that same conversation. So for the men who are here supporting us today, Todd, etc., maybe you could share your insights as well in the chat box, but definitely something to bring forward. And Jean, like, I can just imagine for you, like, it's a totally different world, right? Like, how would you, or did you at any point during your resiliency journey think, how could we serve people online? Like, did that become a conversation in any way? And did you make any headway with that?
Absolutely. My thoughts were always thinking like, what can I do next? How can I help my customers? How can I stay engaged? How can I keep in contact with my employees? Because we had to let them all go. So they weren't our employees anymore, but we wanted to be in contact because we knew one day we would be able to work again. So that was always in our mind. Now, as I mentioned before, it's a franchise. So I can't do what I want to do necessarily. So it has to follow the brand guidelines and whatnot. So it doesn't matter if I'm creative and I want to do something kind of crazy, just to stay open. Like, we could have been open to sell hair products, but I know that clients would have just wanted to sneak in a haircut and it would have been wrong. So we just didn't do that. And we closed down the whole time, and it was what it was. But yeah, we just have to do our best, always trying to do our best and stay in contact with people, make sure everyone knows what's going on and how they can support us.
Yeah, in fairness, I would have snuck in for the head massage.
Yeah.
Just saying. Like, I know you only really focus on men, but that sounded great when you were talking about it in the video. I'm like, oh, I could use one of those right now. Absolutely. And, I love how concerned for your team you were, and that probably added to the stress, right? Like, just in terms of your emotional, when we think about that snow that I talked about earlier, right? And that's a layer, like some of those snows we can't blast through, right? Some of them we can, they're self-inflicted. Some of them are just part of the human experience, and we have to recognize them and feel the feels. So how did you stay in touch with your team, or did you, through that tough time?
Yeah, of course we did. So I employ more than 25 people in our area. And, as I mentioned in the video, that there are employees. So before CERB was announced, we knew that our team would be taken care of because they do pay into EI. So that was it was very happy. That made me feel so happy just to know that they would be taken care of and they wouldn't be destitute, because a lot of times they are just spending their whole paycheck and they're not savers. So I was aware of that. So I made sure that they were taken care of. And then I tried to stay in contact. We did use Zoom. So every week we would have a connection, whether it was coffee. Sometimes we met at 5 o'clock and we had drinks together. We played games together online. So we just tried to connect, and not everybody wanted to connect. Some people wanted to shut it off and turn it back on when we got back together. So that was good. We just kind of worked with everybody and sent them texts just to make sure everyone was okay and doing okay, because not everybody was. So it was important. And especially with hairstylists, they love people, and they're with people all day and they're chatting. And then all of a sudden they're just stuck in their homes and they couldn't get out and see people. So it was very hard for them, and just being aware of that and just knowing that, I think, was very important for me and to give back to them.
That's great. Yeah, definitely. And good for you because I think there's the fight, flight, or freeze, right? And some people just, came back, like just cocooned, and there's no judgment in that. It's what's good for others is not necessarily good for others, right? It just works. Femida, I am curious about your role and how you kept your team, because you're global. So you must have had so many different factors playing into the experiences that your team members were having. They were all working throughout, as opposed to Jean's, right, who were no longer working, yours were. Would you share with us a little bit about how you approach that from a leadership perspective?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the things that we started was a weekly touch point, and that weekly touch point was really to bring people together. It was on a Zoom call or on Microsoft Teams. And essentially, it wasn't really to talk about work. It was to share what they were doing. What is your passion? So every week, and we continue that now, what is your theme? You can share a success at work. You can share a challenge that you've had, but it's really about building that human connection. So where I used to travel into the US every single month, I didn't see my US team. And so they would share some of the things that they were going through. The other thing we did, which I continue to do, is one-on-ones, because sometimes people are not comfortable speaking in a group setting, but they want to share something personally or privately. But a touch point is really, hey, I'm going to touch point with everybody at least once a week. And now it's less often because we're more, some of us are in the office already. So that's a key thing, Allison, always to keep the door open. And I have an open door policy. If you have a challenge, don't be afraid to send a text. We're all human. Last year I lost a couple of family members, and my team knew that. And I kept it quiet, but they knew that, I'd lost people dear to me. And I think by having a human element and a human face to everything, people realize that we all have struggles and we all deal with things in different ways. And whether it's grief or whether it's loneliness or whatever it is, again, it's bringing a human perspective.
Yeah, love it. Actually, there's a really neat question for you inside of our chat box. So let me ask you this. Being in the science and technology field where it's predominantly male, what have been some of your biggest challenges with that?
So I would say the biggest challenges have actually been on the capital raise side. So as we're growing, we're raising capital to continue to grow. And most of the venture capitalists, primarily financial venture capitalists, are male, and they're male dominated in most of those areas, and they're not used to seeing women run technology companies. So, I've had some interesting experiences where I've been asked whether I was married was the first question. Whether, like, just really bizarre. Those are the types of things that actually end a conversation. But there is a bias, definitely, on the financial side. And I'm going to say that some of that does extend into even the banking sector, where most businesses in this sector are run by men. I have not had challenges, dealing with institutions, because when you come from that world, you can speak that language. It's really, I would say, on the venture side and on the financing of business side where the challenges have been. It's also being able to articulate something where people are not familiar with the science and innovation. They're used to bricks and mortar, right? And if we're looking at a completely different industry that's disruptive, there's a level of discomfort. And for people to become comfortable, they just need to be better educated. So that would be the biggest challenge, I would say.
Fair enough. And actually, the statistics, I won't even go into them right now, but over COVID, the investment in female-led technology has just, like, all the gains seem to have been misplaced. And you hear the one or two stories, I think, and that gives us hope. And then you hear the smaller behind the scenes, stuff that people are having trouble getting. So I hope that we can continue to grow in that area and gain grounds. Actually, I have a question along those lines from Sheila Morrison. Thanks, Sheila, for sharing this. How can we support and champion the advocacy for greater investment in innovation? It will be as essential for post-COVID recovery. Apparently, I've been talking too long. I don't know. So for post-COVID recovery, and Nicole, I'm going to go over to you on this one, because like innovation, when you said that you'd never sewed before, I was like, I need to rewind that. Talk about innovation. You had an idea, you had a concept, you went for it. How can people help foster innovation?
When we talked earlier about following your passions, I think that was it. When I started, I had absolutely no desire to sew. I had been taught, shown when I was a child, but I could have cared less, to be completely honest with you. But having a need for something, having a need for cloth diapers for me, that was just a key part. I needed to do something, and I did it. And then I followed my passion. I liked it. So I think that has a huge part to do with it. Just following what you really love to do, and keeping in mind that change is key sometimes. If you, I started with cloth diapers, but I'm ending with, or I guess not ending, continuing with clothing. So you just have to keep on going. It's the same, people starting in storefront and moving to online. It's just following the change and just keep at it and keep on moving through those motions.
Fantastic. And Jean, how do you feel when your hands are tied? Because you have the spirit of innovation, I can tell, having just really, spent time with you today. What do you do? Like, where do you put that creativity if you're in a franchise model where you can't actually be creative?
Well, it comes back to a control thing. So it's just kind of like last year when we went into lockdown, you got stressed because you had no control. You want to plan things, you want to do this, but you can't. So you feel that that's where the stress comes from me. So just really knowing what you can and cannot control. Allison, you talked about that during your keynote speech, and just I think that's an important part, is just being aware of those things that you can control, and the things that you can't, just let it go. Just realize that you can't control that. I can't do that. I need to just let that go, and it will be whenever it comes about. So just really being aware of that, I think, is important.
Awesome. And I often joke it's really easy to say let it go and not quite as easy to do it. Anybody else feel that way? Hands up, right? So, and recognizing that control piece is critical, because then you can at least, like, my joke is often, as long as you can that you're putting snow around something you can't control, at least you're completely aware, and you're like, I'm choosing to bask in this thing that I don't like and I can't change, and it just emotionally is quite healthy to be recognizing that. Erin, I'm curious about you. Like, I can just imagine people who had their hearts, their dreams set on this fairy tale wedding. It's all coming together. COVID happens. Oh, like, awful for your clients. So how did you end up absorbing some of that emotional turmoil that they were experiencing, and like with your clients, and how did you support on the client end, that customer journey, when everything just kind of imploded?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Talk about resiliency. These brides who are replanning again their weddings are showing resilience so much. But just being there and being supportive for them, right? Like, being a soft place for them to land, a listening ear, a judgment-free zone where they can talk about the stress of what's going on, and not putting a lot of pressure on them to have a whole bunch of decisions made, right? Everyone's asking them repeatedly, when's the wedding going to be? What are you going to do? Are you going to postpone? And so just, being supportive of them as they journey through this. And then just being okay with change. Like, we have replanned things so many times, and we rely on doing a lot of events in the store and that sort of stuff. So just kind of pivoting and finding something else to do, finding another way, like Nicole talked about too.
Do you find that the brides, and maybe even yourself, who have had to replan their weddings, are like losing trust? Like, is it getting easier for them, or is it getting harder for them?
I think it's getting easier for them, because at this point in the crisis, they're in the pandemic, they're just wanting to be married. Like, there's a lot less, like, they've kind of lowered their expectations about how many people are going to be able to be there, and they're just kind of moving forward. I think as time goes on, we just learn to live with it, right? It's not great, but having a wedding of some sort this summer rather than postponing for another year, a lot of our brides are choosing to do that.
Awesome. Femida, what are your thoughts around this idea that we're discussing?
Right. So the comment I wanted to make is, I think when I started, I talked about, the patients that we support. And one of the things that was really clear is, social isolation has such a big impact. So this patient journey, and what we did is our team actually went out and elicited questions from different patients through a roundtable to find out what patients were really interested in. So what's important to them? They can't leave their home, they can't go get medication, etc. And what we did was we created a series of videos, little snippets of patient questions that different members of our team were able to get involved in to share that back. So I would say that knowledge sharing was really important. I mean, we've built a company on bringing data together, but also sharing that information and knowledge across broader groups is something that we decided to do, right? Because sometimes we have a question, we don't want to ask it, or we're shy, and we're all suffering from different things. So, that's how we continue to innovate. So despite the struggles, you always have to keep your eye on what can I continue to bring to people and how can I make their lives better. So that was the view we took.
Yeah, beautiful, beautiful, great insights. And I love what Rhonda has written in our chat box. She said, control the controllable, words to live by, 100%. And, I think for many of us, we felt like we were in control before COVID, and then it kind of like just got spotlighted, like we're never actually in control. Certainty was a false sense of security. As we wrap over the next 7 to 8 minutes, what I'd love to do is ask each of you on the panel, what's your vision for the world and women in business? And what is one thing that we can do to support you as you move forward? So Nicole, I'd like to start with you, please.
I would say the biggest thing is just to be there to support the women, just to let them know that you're there and that you're willing to help them out if they need it. We all need someone to talk to. We all need someone to give us some advice sometimes. And that's the biggest thing for me, is just to be there, for me to know that you're there if I need you. And yeah, that's mostly it. I just want to see women succeed. I want to see women to be a major part of business. I want to see people starting businesses and being successful and feeling good in that too. Just not just starting them and failing, but starting them and really succeeding.
Love it. Awesome. And actually, as you're speaking, Nicole, I'm going to ask each of the panelists to put their website and their contact information in the chat box. So each of our people in the audience can follow you, can connect with you, and maybe even like LinkedIn or whatever you'd like to share. Please go ahead and do that, because I know tons of value, and let's continue to support each other. Erin, over to you for your closing thoughts, please.
Yeah, thanks, Allison. What I would love to see is more women letting go of the fear. I think a lot of times women don't reach for that next goal. They don't strive harder because they let fear hold them back. Fear of failure, fear of what other people think of them, fear of not being good enough. And so my vision is that every woman entrepreneur who wants to be successful is successful because they step into who they are meant to be, who they feel they are called to be, and they let go of that fear of failure and just give it their all in business.
Amazing. Awesome. All right, Jean, over to you.
What I would say to everyone is to build a strong, supportive social network. That's something that I've really noticed this last year has brought me through, is just knowing I have other entrepreneurs I can talk to about my journey, because some of my friends didn't understand what I was going through because they were still getting a paycheck and everything was normal in their lives. But for me, everything had gone topsy-turvy, and I needed someone to talk to about that actually understood. So I would say that is the best thing, is to have a strong social network. I also read Isa's comments here about customers being impatient and angry because supply chains were broken. And that's something that people need to understand. Things have changed. Not everything is the same, and to have kindness. And, there's going to be backlogs. Everybody wanted to get their hair cut 2 weeks ago, and it was crazy. And some clients were really understanding, and some were just, rude because we were running late. But it was just, it was what it was, and we had to be patient with them when we wanted to just tell them to, shake their head and just like, come on, like, we've been closed for 7 weeks. What do you expect is the answer we wanted to give. But we just have to understand everyone's coming from a different perspective, and, you don't know, you have to walk a mile in their shoes to understand their day. So just being aware of others, I think, is important too.
Yeah. And you never know what snow they're putting, right? Like, that's misplaced emotion. They're having a tough time here and taking it out on the person who cuts their hair. Right. So thanks for your patience for all of those people, and sorry you have to go through that as part of it. Femida, over to you, and then I'm going to introduce Todd Copeland, and we'll go from there.
Okay, super. So my vision is really to build a strong foundation for women, and that foundation means that we need better financial support. And I'm really hoping that governments reevaluate some of the programs that they've put in place. In order for us to really build and grow as a community and as a country, I just think we need to take a much bigger step and really put our money where our mouths are. So, and obviously echo what all of my colleagues said online about the social support. So thank you.
Beautiful. Wonderful. And actually, we have so many government representatives who are on this call today. So I'm really glad. And I'm going to ask you again to put your information in the chat box. Also, there is a website that this replay is going to be available. You would have got that when you registered, and all of our contact details are included there. So please take advantage of that. Ladies, thank you for being on this panel. Each of you, your brilliance, it inspires me. I am just in awe of what you've accomplished. So thank you for letting me be a part of this. And to Community Futures Middlesex,